Hello and welcome to the Women on the Wall radio show. We are excited to be here. I'm excited to be here in studio with our wonderful producer, Josh. How are you doing, Josh? Oh, can't hear you. Okay, Josh is doing great. He's got a big smile on his face. And then we've got our the president of Women on the Wall, my dear friend, Rebecca Forrest. How are you doing, Rebecca?
I'm good, Alice. I'm here in Austin, and at least it's not cold and rainy right now. We've got just overcast, but I wish I was up there with you, but I'm glad that we have our guest Skyping in with us today. So that's wonderful.
That's right. And we are becoming more and more technologically sound. We've got two people actually Skyped in today, which is very exciting. We've got Rebecca Forrest, and our special guest today is a good friend of ours, Rick Oltman. And Rebecca, I'm going to let you introduce Rick. It's interesting with Women on the Wall. We've kind of found our niche, and I think my niche is on the education issue. Rebecca has been a champion in the on the immigration and illegal immigration issue. And Rick has been a great friend of Rebecca's and a great friend of ours. And so I want to kind of shift it over to you, Rebecca, let you introduce Rick, and then let's take it from there.
Okay, great. Well, I'm just real excited to have Rick here with us today. I think I met Rick back in 2004, I believe, up in Dallas. I went to Dallas for a Citizens for Immigration Reform workshop that FAIR put on there, and that's the time I met Rick, and we've been great friends ever since. He's done so much work when it comes to border security and immigration. I know for well over 20 years you've worked on that. He's also done a lot of lobbying in Washington. He's worked in other states, capitals, helping citizens there to learn how to lobby and to lobby. He's been on a lot of TV shows, done a lot of interviews from Fox and CNN and MSNBC, and you name it, he's been on it. He worked really hard on the Save Our State campaign, on the 187 Save Our State campaign in California. So, Rick, we're just really excited to have you here today, and I'm looking forward to you updating us on what's going on with all of this immigration mess from the Obama administration. So I'm just going to sort of let you hop in here and tell us what you think we need to know.
Well, thanks for having me on, ladies. It's always a pleasure, and Rebecca, I've had just so much respect for you over the years, and I really thank you and Alice for all the work that you do, because the country needs it for sure. The most important thing I think that's going on right now with immigration is the false narrative that's being pushed through the media that the president has signed an executive order to amnesty illegal aliens. He has not done that. He hasn't even come close to it. He's talking it up a lot, and there's a reason for that, but he hasn't done it. Last week I called William Lajeunesse at Fox News in Los Angeles, and I said, even Fox News is reporting this incorrectly. There is no executive order. Well, he wasn't aware of that. You can go to the White House website. There's no executive order. The president went to Las Vegas on November 21st and signed an executive order there. They were not executive orders. They were executive memoranda. Mm-hmm. I think this is all a smokescreen. What did happen was the president made his speech on whatever it was, on amnesty, some general stuff, on the 20th, November 20th. That same day, Jay Johnson, the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, issued 11 memorandums, and you can find them on the DHS website, called Fixing Our Broken Immigration System Through Executive Action. I went through them all, to my knowledge, and we got lawyers taking a look at them, but to my knowledge, no law has been broken yet in these memorandums. Now, President Obama may be mediocre, but he's not stupid. He's not going to do something that is going to bring a lawsuit against him that is going to be won in court. He does not have the right to amnesty illegal aliens, to put them on a pathway to citizenship. He knows it. Everybody knows it. It's not going to happen. But the talk about the amnesty does one thing that they want. It continues the flow coming into the country, which is what everybody wants. They want more people coming here. The more they talk about it, the more it gets reported in foreign media. People that are living, and I'm forever reminded by a friend of mine, Brenda Walker in Berkeley. She says, remember, there's 5 billion people on the planet that have it worse off than Mexicans.
Yes.
Contemplate that for a minute. So that message goes out that America is going to have an amnesty, and people living around the world in terrible squalor are thinking we better get moving while the amnesty window is open.
Right.
And the reason for that is simple. The baby boomers are aging out of the consumer cycle. At 50 years old, your consuming declines. At 54, they're not even aiming commercials at me anymore. Okay?
Right, exactly.
And so the baby boomers, they're leaving the economy at the rate of 10,000 consumers a day. And it's going to grow to 12,000 a day by the end of this decade. So they need to be replaced. Well, who better to replace them with than illegal aliens who are coming in from the third world? And as I always remind people, look, these people have grown up watching American movies and American television. They know exactly how we live here. And they want to come here and live like us.
Right.
And I don't blame them. If I was them, I would try to do the same thing too.
Right.
As I tell people, look, I don't hate Mexicans. I feel sorry for Mexicans. I don't want them here, but I feel sorry for them.
Right. Right.
But they see how we live. They want to come here and live like us. They're being welcomed by the president. They're being welcomed by everybody in the media on both sides of the government whenever they chat it up. And I noticed this starting in the about 2002, 2003 out of the Bush administration, where they were chatting up jobs that Americans won't do. And I have friends on the border that live down on the border, ranchers and Border Patrol agents, would tell me that about a week to 10 days after this talk in Washington about jobs that Americans won't do and similar kind of talk, there'd be a surge on the southern border.
Right.
And so every time seasonally we would see a decline in the number of illegals that were coming in, we'd hear a lot of talk. When it got wet during the monsoon season in Arizona, you'd hear a lot of talk. We're going into the Christmas season. Well, they chatted it all up. My guess would be that after Congress leaves town, we're not going to hear another word about immigration and jobs that Americans won't do until the middle of January, when the Christmas season is officially over in Mexico, when they want to start the trek north again. We'll start hearing it yacked up. But back to the legal process and what's really going on here. There were 11 memos issued by Jay Johnson that do a number of things. Probably, well, one of the most important is that it kills secure communities. Secure communities is no more. We've already had a number of sheriffs and police departments around the country, big ones, who say that they will not comply with ICE detainers. They won't call in anybody. What Jay Johnson has done is ended secure communities. So even those law enforcement departments that want to report somebody they think is an illegal alien to see if ICE wants to put a hold on them, that whole infrastructure is being dismantled.
Wow.
One of them is a personnel reform for ICE officers. They're offering a pay raise, which I figure is a payoff to these ICE officers to keep them from complaining. They're going to expand the deferred action for childhood arrivals, or DACA, which they started on these children that were brought here by their parents. When they were kids, they were brought here illegally, and certainly there are a number of those, and I'm sympathetic to that. But we know that a lot more are going to claim that the DACA memorandum has removed the age cap. It used to be 31 years old. Okay, that age cap has been removed now. You could be 55 years old and claim that your parents brought you here illegally and still qualify under DACA. It's been extended. You can now renew it. It first was put in place for 2 years. It's now been expanded to 3 years, and you can apply for an extension. And then we had the Morton memo, which was signed by the acting head of DHS in 2012, which basically gave everybody was covered under the prosecutorial discretion. The Morton memo. You may have heard about a month ago we had an illegal alien who had been deported 4 times, who murdered 2 sheriff's deputies, one in Sacramento County and one in Placer County here in Northern California. Even that guy was covered under the Morton memo. Well, this puts the Morton memo on steroids, another one. But the one that I found most troubling for the long term that is what I'm calling document number 10 to promote the naturalization process.
Oh, yes.
They're going to permit the, and so I've got the document. here, and I've taken some notes on it. What they're saying is there's 8 million legal permanent residents in the country, or legal permanents. They used to be called permanent resident aliens. Alien, and they all had pink cards, which they called green cards. Well, now they're called permanent residents, and the cards are actually green again. These people are like my mother's daughter is a permanent resident alien from Belgium. She never got her U.S. citizenship because she didn't want to give up her Belgian citizenship. Right. She has all the rights and privileges of any citizen here except for one: she can't vote.
Right.
So there's going to be a push by ICE, by Department of Homeland Security and Department of Justice to encourage 8 million legal permanent residents to seek citizenship in the next year and a half. Now, 8 million is a number that Jay Johnson uses.
Yeah.
I did a little bit of research, and off the DHS's own website, you can get statistics that show that there are 13 million legal permanent residents in the country as of the end of 2010. So you know that there's been a few million added on top of that. Now, why is this important? If you recall, in 1996, the Clinton administration wanted to use a process called Citizenship USA to encourage legal permanent residents to get their citizenship and to become voters and then to vote for Bill Clinton.
Right.
That's what this is.
They get a letter from the president congratulating them. They also get a voter registration card in the mail. And the Clinton campaign wanted to put in a picture of Bill Clinton, encouraging them to vote for him. But somebody, I don't know how this person managed to survive the Clinton administration, but somebody suggested that maybe that wasn't legal, and so they ended up not doing that. But in '96, they naturalized 1,044,000 legal immigrants. With 13 million legal permanent residents in the country as of the end of 2010, what they're planning to do could be 10 to 15 times bigger. That's not an exaggeration.
No.
It could be. Now, in addition to that, it costs $680 to file your application to become a citizen. You have to pay it either with check or with a money order, which means you have to have the funds on hand. Well, Johnson wants to expand it so that you can pay with a credit card. So the credit card pays immigration for the application fee, and then it's up to you to pay the credit card. Okay, so far no problem. He also wants to expand the waivers of the $680 fee. Right now there are waivers in existence. If you make up to 150, if you're working in America, you're making up to 150% of the poverty level, you can get a waiver from ICE for a partial of the fee. Johnson's suggestion is that you provide a 50% waiver, which reduces the cost to $340, for anybody making up to 200% of the federal poverty level, which, if you check, is $47,700 a year for a family of 4. Now, you can live pretty well in a lot of parts of this country on $47,000. So they're looking at cutting the fee to $340 for most people. Now, once again, and if you look at the numbers of people, the number one country that the legal permanent residents are from are Mexico. Number 2 is China. Number 3, the Philippines, followed by India, the Dominican Republic, Cuba, and right on down the line. Now, a lot of people would say, well, people have cultural values, they have religion and morality, they're not necessarily Democrat voters. Forget that.
Yeah, forget it.
It's based on income. Every poll I've ever seen of Hispanic Americans says that they vote the same way the rest of America votes. They vote their pocketbook.
Right.
And low-income voters, when they vote, do not vote for Republicans because Republicans are pushing tax cuts and low-income voters are not paying what?
They're paying tax.
Taxes.
Paying taxes.
Right.
So that's what is the determinant. So this is what we're looking at. And I did a study, and I've sent it on to some friends of mine at the Republican National Committee, and I said, you need to look at this if you want to have a Republican Party after the next election, because they are targeting the 2016 election. And if you look at some of the states, for instance, Florida is a swing state. Obama won Florida by 74,000 votes. There's 1.2 million legal permanent residents in Florida. If only 10% of them became citizens and registered as Democrats, that would put Florida out of reach.
Yeah.
So
wow.
This is the game, and I think it's all being obscured by all of this discussion about the amnesty and the talk about the amnesty, and you have all these people, not all these people, you've had a couple of times where Obama's been out speaking to a group and you've had some heckler heckling him like that wasn't contrived, right?
Right.
About it. It's to keep that discussion in the news and to keep the focus on the fact that the president's going to amnesty illegal aliens, which I never believed he was going to do. They're encouraging them to come. He's not going to get rid of them. Interior enforcement is pretty much ended under this president. We're not going to have any more interior enforcement. But I think this is the game. It is about, and I don't even know how people that want to claim amnesty and refugee status, how that's going to fit in. Are we going to have a big flood of people claiming that I'm a homosexual and homosexuals are persecuted in my country, so I deserve to come here under your rules? And then are they going to be put on a fast track to citizenship? I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of reasons why you could claim that you're being persecuted at home, but I don't know how that fits in here. But I would bet that these people, as lying and conniving and as corrupt as they are, will do everything they can to push this. One last thing. The main driver behind Citizenship USA in 1996, the Clinton administration, was a guy named Rahm Emanuel.
Oh, boy.
Rahm Emanuel just announced over the weekend that he and Gutierrez, the congressman from Chicago, are going to be working hard on naturalizing citizens up there. I'm sure there won't be any corruption in that process, right?
Oh, no, none. Absolutely not. Rick, it's just incredible to me. How do Republicans not understand that if the Democrats are pushing for something, it is not in our best interest? You know, if there was any way in hell, excuse my French here, that these illegal aliens would ever vote for Republicans, the Democrats would be doing everything in their power to keep them out. So
I think that sums it all up. Yes, in fact, during the campaign, when we were hearing about how the Republicans were alienating the Hispanic vote, boy, these Republicans are never going to get the Hispanic vote, is what the Democrat guys were saying on TV, as if they really cared about the future of the Republican Party. It was ridiculous. I know. If a Democrat says it's good, you really have to look at it and say, yeah, it probably isn't. You know, why don't you explain to me why you think it's good? I don't know why they do it. I mean, I think what's going on in the Chamber of Commerce, or as I call them, the Chamber of Commerce clan, they want more customers. That's the game. It isn't more complicated. And both the Democrats and the Republicans are pandering to the Chamber of Commerce for support for the next election. That's the way I see it.
Exactly. You know, and I think the only way that there's any hope, and I'm not sure if there is at all, is for, once again, for cities to do things. You know, and Steve McGraw just announced the other day now that since Texas will be pulling the National Guard away from the border, that we're now going to have cameras on the border. Well, I think we've already done this back in 2006, if I'm not mistaken. We spent a ton of money. It produced no results, really. It was a joke. And Rick, do you remember how much money? I mean, it was a lot of money that we spent. And I've
been to the Laredo Border Patrol station where they have all the cameras, or they're looking down along the river. I've been there. It works great, but it doesn't mean anything if you're not going to be deploying officers to stop anybody.
Right. And so once again, here we go down this rabbit hole of just throwing money, but we're not going to get any results. And Perry was the laughing stock of the state over this camera thing. And I'm just looking here trying to remember what the statistics were. They were so bad. It was called the Texas Border Watch program. And if you remember, it was actually set up so that the people could sit and watch the cameras and report illegal aliens that they saw crossing. As if there was going to be a Border Patrol agent anywhere that could get there to do anything about it. It was a joke. So here we go again. But, I mean, is that our only hope, is for states to try to do something about sanctuary cities, or is that even not anything that we can do?
Well, I'm convinced that that the states are the key to this. And as I've been saying for the longest time, I didn't think that there was going to be an amnesty because there wasn't enough support for it. Clearly, the American people don't want it. but that as more states, if you end up with more sanctuary cities, more states that are giving driver's licenses and in-state tuitions and other benefits to illegal aliens, more sheriffs and police departments who refuse to hold any illegal alien regardless of what the charge is, or almost regardless of what the charge is, that as I don't know what the tipping point is, if it's 20 states, if it's 25 states, I don't know what that is, but that is what the feds were waiting for. And then once you get enough states doing that, then the federal government will simply shrug and say, well, okay, if the states are doing it, then we'll do it. Now, what is funny is, I know our friend Maria Espinoza was in a meeting with Eric Holder at one point, and she just told me a couple of months ago that after the meeting, she said, well, you know, what's going on with the amnesty and the legalization? And Holder's response was, well, you know, we're waiting to see more states do something. I mean, Maria had heard me say that for 2 years, and here's Holder telling her they're waiting for the states. So I think that's possible. One of the things that I wanted to do was to get a multi-state initiative process going for E-Verify for government employees, just government employees, state, county. My phone keeps ringing here, I'm so sorry. I'm going to, there, turn it off again. Normally I'm on the phone when I'm doing these radio shows, so. By getting a multi-state initiative process going that required E-Verify for government employees only, not regular private sector business, but state, county, cities. And the argument would be that if your tax dollars are paying wages, those wages should be paid to American workers, which is American citizens or legal immigrants with a work visa. I think we could win that with 70% of the vote. And then once people got used to the idea of E-Verify, and more importantly, once governments could see how E-Verify worked, then you could have another initiative that said, we want businesses now to use E-Verify in order to protect American workers. And I thought that was the way to go to get the states ginned up. To do it with $5 million, I could do 14 states. Now, I was a chair of one of the campaigns for Prop 187 in 1994, 20 years ago, which we won with everybody against us. 10 years ago in Arizona, we won Proposition 200 down there. Every time you give the voters a chance to make a decision on this, they vote for border security, you know, they vote to preserve jobs for Americans. Every time you give them a chance to do it. In Oregon, just a few weeks ago, the Oregon state legislature passed a law allowing illegal aliens to have driver's license. It was immediately referended. There's some excellent activists up in American activists up in Oregon. The vote was, what we wanted was people to vote no on the referendum. That was it. It's like the state has decided to give driver's license to illegals. Do you agree or not? No is what we wanted people to vote on. The polls showed that the no's were 2/3 of the vote. People opposed that 2-1. Now, they had a Senate race up there. They had a guy named Merkley, who's a real socialist. I mean, he wants to nationalize the oil companies, all right? And there was a woman Republican named Monica Webby who was running against him. She would not come out and say, I advise people to vote no on the referendum. She wouldn't do it. I knew activists up there that were trying to convince her to do this. She lost that election. The referendum went down with 68% no's on it in Oregon. 68% of the voters in Oregon did not want to give a driver's license to illegal aliens. I almost wrote a piece that I was going to call Stupid Effing Republicans. And I was going to use her. Richardson, the Republican who was running against the incumbent governor in Oregon, told a friend of mine, we'll do, my campaign will do robocalls to ask people to vote against this referendum. Terrific, I thought, if he does that. So a friend of mine was in touch with this campaign. He said, we've got the list, we'll do the robocalls. After a couple of weeks, I said, what's going on with the Richardson campaign? Well, he hasn't called me back about the robocalls. I said, well, this will help him in the election. Well, I know. About 10 days before the election, I called up and I said, if Richards is going to do something, he better be doing it because we're getting kind of close to the election. They're not returning my calls. So another stupid Republican.
Right.
Richardson lost by 5 points.
Right.
The initiative lost by 2/3. You think that would have helped them in the campaign? Now, to answer your question, what's the matter with some of these Republicans? I don't know, unless they are so deep into the pocket of the Chamber of Commerce and big money. And in Oregon, it's big agriculture, okay?
Right, yeah.
And in fact, I sent a message to Monica Webby through one of the people that was working on it up there, and I said, look, go to Monica Webby and tell her this. If you haven't learned to lie, you're going into the U.S. Senate, you're going to have to learn to lie there. So try this on, okay? Go to big agriculture and tell them, look, the Obama's left the border open. There's no impedance to your flow of cheap labor that you need for big ag, okay? We're not going to close the border. However, if there is a terrorist attack, and it can be proven that the terrorist came across that open border, there will be demands to seal that border, and your access to cheap labor is going to be cut off. You will need me, Monica Webby, in the majority to sponsor a bill, a guest worker plan, to continue your access to cheap foreign labor. And I'm that person. Go tell her to give that message to Big Ag so she can come out and tell everybody to vote against the initiative and get some of those votes. Not a chance. So I don't know. If ideologically they're not fit for the job, it takes a special kind of person to be a candidate. I understand that. I was a candidate once. I disappointed myself so severely I vowed to never ever be a candidate for again. My job was running campaigns, not being the candidate. But it takes a certain kind of person to do it. But I mean, that is sort of what we were looking at. And some of us were just standing there, our foreheads are black and blue from slapping ourselves in the forehead about why these people don't get it.
Right,
I mean,
right.
I mean,
Rick, do you think it's the strategies and tactics of the other side who manipulate and create these false narratives? It seems like the other side is the master of the false narrative. Are they just completely complicit and bought off?
I think both. I think, first of all, anytime, and this is true, I think, for most politicians, but especially the Democrats, anytime a Democrat says anything, you have to assume that it's a lie. I mean, I always assume that it's a lie. I will check it out, but I mean, that's my default, is that the Democrats are lying. But I think they're also corrupt. And I think you can add into that a lot of them hate America or hate America first, or maybe they have personal self-esteem problems, and so for that reason they, they can't stand it. A lot of these leftists, a lot of these, we call them liberals. Judge Bork, Robert Bork, in his books Launching Towards Gomorrah, calls them the barbarians of modern liberalism. They hate competition of any kind, which is why they hate capitalism. They hate competition. They don't think anybody should be held responsible. They don't want anybody, this is what Robert Bork called radical egalitarianism. You can do whatever you want to do. Nobody should be held responsible for anything, okay? That's why I think they're against the death penalty, because nobody can be responsible for putting somebody else to death, which I find is ironic, okay? I think it's, there's a number of books out there. There's a book called The Liberal Mind that I read. They're emotionally immature people. Now, 100 years ago, it may not have mattered what these people thought. There may not be more of these emotionally immature people in the country now than there were 100 years ago. But the country was different 100 years ago.
Right.
If 100 years ago, we were all working on an assembly line, well, first of all, you two ladies would have been men. But in any case, if we were all working on an assembly line and we had a liberal working with us, and he raised up and he made one of these stupid liberal types of comments, one of us would have looked at him and said, if you don't finish that job, you're not going to get paid. And then we would have all gone back to work. What we live in today is such an abundant society that we've allowed the leftists, these barbarians, to elevate the frivolous to the important. And I think that's what we're hearing every day from these people. And some of it is completely opposite. I'll give you a great example. The Ferguson, the first night of the Ferguson riots, when the governor, Democrat Jay Nixon of Missouri, wouldn't send the National Guard in. What does he say after he's being challenged by the lieutenant governor, who wants him to testify under oath? The former mayor of Ferguson thinks he ought to resign. What did Jay Nixon say about why they didn't send in the National Guard? Well, they didn't want to have a Kent State situation where the National Guard was shooting people. I think they wanted a Kent State situation. I think that's the typical Democrat lie. When they're telling you something, look to see the opposite, and that's probably what they want. I think they wanted a Kent State situation there. They're trying to take over wherever they can. Ferguson has 54 police officers. They were on 12-hour shifts, which means 25 to 30 of them were working the first night of the riots. I asked retired police officers, active duty police officers, retired sheriffs, even retired federal law enforcement people. I did a little poll and I asked them, I said, do you think if that crowd would have attacked that small group of police that were standing out in front of the fire department building and the police department, that they would have used deadly force to protect themselves? Every single one of them said yes. I said, then perfect. Then Eric Holder would have the narrative that racist white cops murdered innocent, peaceful black demonstrators who were doing nothing more than exercising their constitutional rights. That would have been the narrative. I'm convinced of it. Yeah. So, I mean, my example with Jay Nixon is whatever they're saying, I think you have to assume that the opposite is true.
Right. You know, Alice, you're absolutely right. When Rick and I were talking last night, I was telling him how, you know, you're the main thing you work on and that you're really becoming an expert on is the Common Core and, you know, all the connections between the mess that we're in. And so he was telling me that, you know, his nieces, I believe in California, have maybe had a little bit of exposure to that. Rick, you want to tell her real quick what you saw, what you found in the book you found in their core?
My nieces go to one of the most exclusive high schools in the country. It's like $40,000 a year a piece to put them through this high school. And I was putting something in the older niece's car, and I realized there was a book there. I think the title of it was "My Life as a Slave Girl." And it turns out that there's been like 3 such books that she's written so far. And I've asked them in the past if they even knew who William Lloyd Garrison was, the famous abolitionist, and they didn't know who he was. And I thought, well, you know, that's just perfect. Right? That's just perfect. Let's continue to emphasize, look, slavery was bad. What was it? 7 to 10% of Americans owned slaves at one point, right? 7 to 10%. We did away with it. We tried to, make amends. Nobody's perfect. America isn't perfect, but it's the best thing on the planet. That's why so many people want to come here.
Right.
But these people that want to weaken America and diminish America, diminish our power, our military power, our economic power, our diplomatic power, the people that want to do that, they will look to anything. And I think I really bored Rebecca by reading to her from a book about Robespierre and the French Revolution, where this is what was going on with the intelligentsia just prior to the French Revolution. They tore down everything in France. Everything in France was bad, even though France was one of the leaders of the world at that time. That is what the intellectuals did. And
that's exactly what they're doing right now, Rick. I mean, when you look at the big picture of the Common Core and what's the federal takeover, it's actually worse than a federal takeover of the education system because it's the partnership. It's a public-private partnership. So they're turning capitalism into crony capitalism, but we're no longer teaching children reading, writing, math, and history in K through 12 so that they have a solid foundation and education of opportunity so that they have that foundation to then go on, whether they go into the vocational field or go into college, where then you have your logical or critical thinking, but you have that solid foundation. Now it's all about an education of equity. And it's social emotional learning, teaching our children. It's social justice run amok in the education system, and no longer is it just at the university level with the intellectuals. The intellectuals are the ones in charge of bringing it down into K through 12. And that's what the Common Core is. And what they're doing is weeding out our veteran teachers, those ones that would call them on it. They're weeding them out of the system, and they're producing these basically scope and sequence a control system of the newer teachers to keep them on task and providing them scripts, providing them the curriculum, so that they no longer are the teacher imparting knowledge because the teacher knows the knowledge themselves. They are just a facilitator of an agenda. And it's passing through these younger, what has been described, and some even describe themselves as change agents. And they're turning us from it's a revolution through education, and they're turning us from a constitutional republic to a full-blown mob rule democracy. And they're doing it through education. And when you look at the people behind this, when you look at Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton, when Hillary was developing Hillary Care, which is now being implemented today without them being in office, she was also working with Mark Tucker to develop the blueprint for the takeover of our education system. It's all connected, and you're exactly right. It's about equalizing America in the world and bringing us down. And it's very scary when you see it at play, and you see it like you saw it, Rick, in your own, children, our children and our grandchildren are being indoctrinated. And as Mel Moss has said, basically we're funding our own demise, and we're allowing them to use our children to do it.
I took my nieces aside just before school started, and I said, look, and they've followed me, and they've watched me on TV, and they see me all the time, and they know me very well. And I said, look, you're going to hear a lot of crap about capitalism. They're going to really be pounding capitalism. But every time you hear the word capitalism, I want you to think of the word competition.
Right.
Think competition when they say capitalism. And they're standing there, and I said, now think, what has competition done? Competition has brought us everything we take for granted. Competition has brought it to us faster, cheaper, smaller, and I'm pointing to their iPhones that they're holding in their hands. I said, competition has done that. So whenever you hear somebody start hammering capitalism, I want you to think of competition and don't believe it. And then they nod, and they do listen. They're good, smart kids. I spoke to a retired teacher here recently. It was just happened that we bumped into each other and we were talking. And I didn't really tell her where I was coming from. And she says, well, I think that there's way too much emphasis on learning. There's too much emphasis on learning this rote stuff. And I said, well, what do you think the emphasis ought to be on? She goes, well, I think the emphasis needs to be on thinking. We need to teach people how to think. And I thought for a second, and I said, but isn't learning math equations and learning about history and the cause and effect in history and learning about nature and biology, isn't that learning process also teaching them how to think? And I'll give you the response. I'm sure it's one that you're familiar with whenever you make a point like that. Here was the response. But I mean, and this was a retired teacher, which means she'd been around for a long time. So this whole plan has been around for a long time.
You're right. You're exactly right.
But the stakes here, and whether it's Common Core or it's immigration or turning legal residents into Democrat voters and welfare recipients, which is what we. This thing with the immigration, if we can't save the Republican Party, we can't save the country. And if we can't save the country, we can't save the world. And I know that sounds like romantic nonsense, but they're all linked together. Now, if we can save the Republican Party, does that mean we can save America? Not necessarily. If we can save America, does that mean that we can save the world from tyranny? Not necessarily. But without doing one, we don't have a chance at doing the rest of it. And those are the stakes. And I know to some people that are not as familiar with the education system or the immigration system, that sounds like far-fetched stuff. It isn't far-fetched. Cause and effect rules the world. And these causes, the causes in education, the causes of immigration, they have an effect, and the effects are not good, and we're seeing those effects now.
Absolutely.
We have about 4 minutes left of the show. I'd like to ask you, Rick, and Rebecca, moving forward, people who are listening to this show today, what is their call to action? We always say, seek the truth, share the truth, and stand up for the truth. Where do we seek the truth? We're going to share the truth, and how do we stand up for the truth on the issue of immigration? And I'll start with you, Rick, and then Rebecca, you can close up.
Well, I think there's lots of calls to call Congress to do this. I think that we need to make calls to the leadership of the Republican Party. That's either your state leadership or the ranks previous in Washington, and say, this is what we think, and you will not get our support if you do this. It's the Republicans, and they're not going to get behind an amnesty, but if they did, they'd lose so many Republicans that would simply walk away from the party. Like, as I said earlier, I myself did not vote for McCain in 2008. I did vote for Romney because I wanted to get rid of Obama, but I could not vote for a guy who had written an amnesty with Ted Kennedy. I couldn't do it. And if the Republican Party goes that way again, I will not support them. I won't do it, because my support for them, if they decide to go that way, my support for them wouldn't matter anyway. So I think that the call to action is to contact your Republican leaders in the state and at the national level and tell them, no more money, no more votes, this is what we want. I think they've got to hear it, and they've got to hear it loud and clear. Now, many of them know it. I know that Reince Priebus knows it, but he can't make the case to everybody else he's dealing with unless he can say, I'm getting 1 million calls on this. You know what I mean? So I think that's the call to action. We have got to go to the head of the party, because there's a big move on to have a third party. That would be the death of the Republican Party right there. And that would put Democrats in charge, and that would only, I believe, accelerate the decline of America. They don't want to destroy it. Everybody wants to, well, they want to destroy America. No, there's no profit in destroying America. But they do want to weaken it. They want to keep the economy going. All right? We're weakening the middle class, but we're bringing in, we're having what I call the Dollar Tree economy is being created. That's what's happening. When the people come in, it's about jobs, because you're going to have something to spend, but mainly, and when you stop and ask about it, and Rebecca, when an illegal crosses the border, what do they have with them? They got the clothes on their back and a water jug, right? Right. They have nothing. They want everything. They want to buy everything. They know exactly how we live here, and that's exactly what they want. One last thing I want to say, I know we're running out of time. The first thing we have to do to get the immigration situation under control is to stop sending these welcoming messages. Start sending a message of deterrence. We're never going to be able to stop everybody who wants to get into the country if we can't stop them from wanting to come. We've got to reduce their expectations that they're going to make it. That, I believe, is what all this talk about the amnesty and jobs that Americans won't do is. That's the welcoming message. And it's raising expectations that if you come, you're going to make it, and if you make it, you're going to be able to live here. We have got to, as a government, send a message, a deterrent message that reduces the number that try to get here. Then we can be more effective at securing the border.
Right.
That's it. Rebecca?
Well, a couple of things that I'm thinking of after what Rick just said. Number one, when you're talking about the magnets that draw them there, I just wanted to mention that, ERCOT, the organization I helped to get going years ago, we have a lawsuit against the state of Texas over the in-state tuition, and it's actually before the Texas Supreme Court, will be before the Texas Supreme Court. So, I would encourage people to support that organization. I'm no longer involved with it, but Maria Martinez is the head of it now, and I would really encourage people to support that organization. So hopefully we can do something about that, and we'll win. The other thing is that I do think that Rick sent me the information that he's talking about today, the studies that he's done that deal with the naturalization of, and also the voting, how it affects the electoral votes and stuff. So we will put that up. And I do think we need to get that out to our Tea Party leaders as well, because they have a lot of connections with the Republican Party in Texas. And, I just don't think these people understand what they're doing. So I think we need to get that information out, because it'll scare the living daylights out of them, I think. Because typically when we tell them, they don't listen. they just go, oh, you're just a racist and you're an idiot and this isn't really happening. But when you've got the data right there, it's hard to say that anymore. So thanks, Rick, for getting that all together and for bringing it to our attention, because I didn't understand it as well as you've explained it. I think that's great.
Yeah. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, we were so excited to have you on today, Rick, and we hope that you will come back with us and let's keep the discussion going. This is how we share the truth, it is by putting together these shows and getting this information out to our friends and neighbors and calling on our friends and neighbors to get this information out. It's the power of compounding activists, and that's what we're all about. So, Rick, thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. Rebecca, enjoy your day in Austin, and we will be back next week, same time, same place. Have a great week. Bye-bye.